Hello, in this video, I'm going to show you how you can create a GUI application using Python that will allow user to enter data to add a record into a table in a MySQL database. And so this is what the UI is going to look like. So this is to insert a new record in a dog table. So we're going to specify the dog name, age, breed, weight, club fee, and the owner ID. To start with the application, let's create a new UI using the Qt designer. So let's start using the template for a dialog without buttons. So click the template and click create. And then let's add our button. So that will be push buttons, 2 of them. So we want a save and cancel. So the first one is going to be save button. And we also need to change the text. So let's change the text to save. Alternatively, you can also leave that to just say OK. That's fine as well. And I can change this into cancel and call this cancel button. And we can hook up the cancel button so that it will close the dialog. So if the sender is the cancel button and it's clicked, we are going to send the signal to the dialog to close. That's the 2 buttons. And let's compare this to the GUI that you want to create. So this is the GUI that we want to create. So those are the 2 buttons, cancel and save. And then here we have a form layout. So there's a label and a input, label, input, label, input. And you can't see it here, but right around here where there's a blank space, that's a label that's empty for error messages and other messages to the user. So when you press save, if everything goes well, then you should tell the user that this record has been inserted. So to create a form in our GUI, we can use the form layout. So let's put one of those here. So we want a form layout about here. And we want a label for the error message. So put it here. We want our label to span the whole way across the dialog, so all the way to here. And let's start inserting the label. But for that, let's look at our table for reference. So for your application, you need to look at your own table. So don't follow this video exactly because you need to adjust it according to your own table. So here I'm looking at my database, the Kennel Club, and I'm looking at the dog table. And this is the properties of the dog table. And you can see here that the dog table has 7 columns. And out of the 7 columns, there's 1 primary key, dog ID. And if you notice here, it's auto-incremented. So with this, I don't need to have the user entering the dog ID because it's going to be generated. So I will have the form asking the user for the value of all the 6 other columns here. Now, notice here, owner social security number, that one, the bottom one here. This is a foreign key, and this foreign key has to exist in this owner table. So this owner SSN actually will reference this. And if the value that's entered by the user does not exist, this will cause the insert to fail. If the social security number for the owner that's entered by the user does not exist in the owner table, the insert will fail. And in this case, it actually will fail with an error that we will handle in the code later. I will show you how to do that. Now, apart from looking at the primary key and the foreign key, we also need to look at the not null constraint here, this column. you can see that there are 4 columns that have the not null checked. One of them is dog ID, which will be auto-generated, so we're not going to ask that from the user. The other 3 columns, we have to make sure that the user actually enters something, otherwise the insert will fail anyways. So we need to add code to check that. And we'll look at that in more detail later. But for now, you need to look at your own table and see which column has this restriction so that you can handle it in your code properly later. So now we're back in the designer. So I'm going to put 6 label for the 6 column that I'm going to request the user to supply. So 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now, for all this text label, we don't really care what the object name is going to be. We only care that this shows a label that the user can use to understand the lay of the land here. So this label will be a label for the input box that we will have on the right hand side here. And for the text input, we will use what is called line edit. And this is the widget, so I'm going to get 6 of them. And that's all of the widgets that we need. Well, at least for my table. For your table, you probably need more or fewer widgets, but that will be depending on what your table look like. Now, the next thing to do is we need to name the control so that we can use it properly from our Python program. So first, let's name our error message here. So this is a Q label, as you can see in here. That's a Q label. That's also a Q label. That's actually referring to the same thing. And let's name it something. Let's call it message, so that we know that the widget called message will be a place where we can stick our error messages. And we don't want it to have any text to start with, because we don't have any message to the user when they just got started. And next up, let's name each one of this label and the corresponding input widget. So let's rename this text label into something that's more informative. So we want it to be dog name. And the input widget, let's call it dog name. So note that this label, I don't care what the name of the label is. It could be label underscore 2, label underscore 3, I don't care. But this line edit, because I'm going to use it in my program, I want to name it into something that I can refer to later. So that's going to be age. So I don't care about the name, I just care about the text. So, and this is going to be an object called age. So it's a QLen edit, and the name is going to be age in our program. And then this one is a label, and we want to change the text to be the name of the column. And in this case, it's going to be breed in my table. And then let's change the line edit to breed. And the next one is weight. Let's use the filter here. And the following is club fee. And then this one is owner social. And we need to name the line edit. So this one is already named, and we need to change this one to weight. And club fee. owner social. Now we have one more widget to name, the dialog itself. So let's click the dialog. And I'm going to name it add dog. And now I'm ready to save. I'm going to name it add dog UI. And now let's switch to Visual Studio Code. Okay, so I'm in Visual Studio Code, and here's the file that I just created, the add-dog.ui. And let's generate the .py file for that. So for that, I need to open a terminal. And then I need to run the Python UI compiler. And the output is going to be add-dog.py, and the input is add-dog.ui. And now I have an add-dog.py, which is a module containing a class UI add-dog, and that corresponding to the name that we gave in the Qt designer. Now, the next thing is to create the driver program to show the add-dog dialog. Okay, so I'm just going to copy all of this code and going back to Visual Studio Code. And I'm creating a new file. I'm going to call it add-dog driver. And make sure that the extension is .py. And I'm going to paste the whole code. And so we need to change this to the correct name. We call ours add-dog. So let's change this to add-dog. UI add-dog. One of the modules that's imported in this template is getDB connection. If you don't have the getDB connection yet, you should watch the other video that explain the getDB connection and the connection pool. And here I already have the file created, so I'm okay to proceed. Okay, so let's see what's going on here. This is very similar to other code that we used to drive Qt UI. So first we initialize, and then we have a connection set up, but when a trigger, which is the save button getting clicked, and a slot, in this case it's add record. And the code itself here, it will create an application, show the dialog, and then run the event loop. So this is very similar to the code that we've been working with, except that there's this add record code that's pretty long. So let's have a look. So the first part of add record is checking if all the required columns are there. So in the case of the dog table, you need to have the dog name, you need to have club fee, and you need to have the owner social. And once that's validated, and we're creating a connection to the database, and then we're getting the cursor, and we are going to insert the data into the table. And this is the SQL command, and this is the execution, and then we commit the change, and then we set a message whether the record is inserted or not. And if there is an error, we will show that error to the user as well. And then after that, we just close the cursor and close the connection. Okay, so it looks long, but it's actually pretty straightforward. So let's continue with our code here. So first we need to make adjustment in here. So remember that I have 6 columns that I care about. So my first column is dog name, which is required. And then there is age, breed, weight, club fee, and owner as well. And the one that are required are the owner and club fee and dog name. I'm going to check that in here. So here I'm going to just make a new variable so that I don't have to type something that is very long. You don't have to use a whole new variable. You can use the widget directly. That's up to you. But for this example, I'm going to use a variable. So I'm going to call it our dog name. And the column, the first column is going to be dog name. And this widget, I name it dog name. So if you don't remember the widget name, you can look at the code that's generated. So you go to add dog and you look at the form, you will see the here's the dog name, and that's the line edit, and it's called dog name with little d. Remember, in Python, capitalization matter. If you don't want to read the code, you can also look at the Qt designer and just click the line edit, and you could see the name up here. Okay, going back to our code. So I need 3 variables I need to check: dog name, club3, and owner SSN. So I'm going to call this var club3, and it's going to be club3 with little c. And then the other one is owner social. So this code means that I am referencing the dialog, and I want to get the owner widget, and then I want to get the text content of that widget. So here I'm looking at this dialog. So self is this dialog itself, and then owner SSN is this widget here. You see the name, and then the dot text and then open and close parentheses, just simply getting the content of that line edit. So now I just wanted to check that none of these is empty. So if dog name is empty, I'm going to print an error on the message box saying that dog name is required. And the same with the club tree. And I need to add one more for my owner social. And that's all the adjustment I need for this section. Now, the next one is the actual insertion. So I need to first create the insert table that is suitable for this. So I can make this into multiple lines by adding a parentheses. So insert into what table? So the table in my case is dog, and the columns that I care about are the 6 columns that I wrote up here. So I'm going to just copy here. I have it as a reference. So I have 6 columns. So this column names in here, the one in the first line is the column names in the database. And it has to match exactly with what's in your database. So let's double check with dbeaver. And these are the 6 columns that I'm using. So going back to Visual Studio. Now I need to make sure that I supply 6 values for the 6 columns that I list here. So this is 1, 2, 3. I need 3 more. So this insert is just a parameterized query, just like the parameterized query that you learned earlier in the semester. So if you remember, parameterized query look like this. So there's the select statement and then the parameter. Similarly, with insert, you have the insert statement and then parameter, parameter, parameter. So all you need to do is when you execute the SQL, you need to specify the parameter. So we need to specify 6 parameters for this. So I already have the dog name in a variable. Alternatively, if you don't have it in a variable, you can always say cell, and then what's the widget, and then text. So that's the same thing. And then for age, I don't have it in a variable, so I'm going to just have to do cell, age, the widget, and then get the content of the text. So, and club fee I have in a variable, so I can just use the variable. Owner, I also have it in a variable, I can just use that variable. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One's missing. What did I miss? Wait. Okay. So now I have 6 columns and 6 values. Now, it is very advisable to actually try this first to make sure that this command will run correctly. So let me just copy this whole thing. One thing that I want to bring your attention to is note that there is a space here. So let's open a SQL query here. Right click, SQL editor. Yeah, let's zoom out a little bit. So remove the quotes. And the values, I need to supply some values. So let's say dog name is Carl, age 8, breed Doberman, weight 20, up 100, owner SSN. Now, this happens to be one of the owner social that I know exists. So let's double check it. And you could see that here's the social 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's same one. So let's run this. And let's check if this is inserted. So just from this message, we could see that it was inserted, but let's double check it. And you could see that Carl is added in there. Okay, so our insert statement looks good. And we can try this. First save it and press run. So let's put another dog name. And press save. Let's see what happened. And we got the message that row is added. So we should have another dog called Coco. And here there's Coco, who's a Havanese with weight 24 pounds and club fee 70. So in this video, you learn how to create a PyQt application, a GUI application using Qt library that will allow the user to enter data for a table in MySQL database, and it will save that into the database when the user press save. You also have some error handling, and If the user doesn't exist, this actually will show up as an error. And here you could see that the owner does not exist. And when I try to add it, it will show an error that the foreign key constraint is violated. I hope this video helped. Bye now.